Be
think
thrice
the
blessed.
stream is starting. And oh shitters. Wait, can y'all say something?
Saying some.
Cougars.
Okay.
Check, check,
Good, good,
check.
good. Okay, good.
Shitters.
The audio's working. Awesome. The stream's starting and everything is happening right now and that's great. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Oh, I should turn my camera on. All right. Got the mic working. Good, good, good. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, let's do some introductions and just say names, pronouns, a little bit about yourself, something that you find interesting or something. I can go first. I'm Lua. And just, I mean, I have a YouTube channel, which you all know. And oh, really excited to read this book. It was a very pleasant read. And happy to be here. Ben, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Ben. I was raised in a big city called Toronto, and now I live in a smaller city called Ottawa Hull. I like learning all kinds of things, and this book club has been good for that. Pronouns are mostly he, him, but it's a bit of a mystery too. Sometimes. Thank
Nice.
you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here. It's good to see you.
To you too.
Corin, do you want to go next?
Did you say me?
Oh, I said Corin.
Oh, okay. That doesn't sound anything like Nick. I don't know why. That's
I think it got cut off a bit because I didn't hear corn either. That's fine. I am a disabled trans man. You can call me Corin, Corey, or Cornelius. I have a service dog who's cuter than me. I wish I was taller, and I want a beard. That's all I've got.
Nice.
Nice.
Tovio, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'm Tovio. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns. Um, I stream sometimes under Nomanosomatic. And I like stuff and things. That's
Cool. Chris, do you want to go?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Chris. My pronouns are he, him. I like being online a lot. I like being on Discord a lot. I'm a gamer. I stream sometimes. I stream as Spoogen, which is my handle here. Um, and I'm super excited about reading this book. I feel like there is a lot that I am going to get out of it. And I'm just super excited to share this book with y'all.
Awesome, thanks. Tom, you're up.
Well met. I'm Tom, and I am an artist most of the time. I also make tabletop RPG games, and I am also a purveyor of stuff and things. I love them,
Nice.
and I really enjoy book club. Got lots of positive feelings and warm feelings in my heart about it.
Awesome.
That's shit. He, him, they, whatever.
Cool, thanks. Silver Spook, do you want to go?
Oh, sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Silver Spook, also known as Chris, him or they, them. And yeah, I'm a native Hawaiian activist, defender of our sacred mountain, Mauna Kea, here, as well as our all the islands. And also, I make video games like that one. And yeah, happy to be here. And always enjoy book club and hanging out with my friends. Yeah.
Nice. And if anyone is watching, you can also find Silver Spook on Twitch, where they stream. Yeah, awesome, thanks. Akemi, really glad you're here. Would you like to go?
Yeah. 始めてやさい. Wanne Kemi Aibin. Kita surugutu unege sabira. Hello, my name's Akemi. Nice to meet you all. I use they, them pronouns. I live in Seminole, Temecula lands, North Florida. I'm originally from Peru, and my background is like mixed Okinawan or Uchinanchu or Shimanchu or Ryukyuan or Lutu, and European. And yeah, I'm excited to get to discuss and read this book with you all. And that was my cat.
Aww. Yeah, Akemi suggested the book, so I'm really glad you're here because I feel like you brought us together. Yeah, Caitlin, would you like to go?
Hi. Hi, I'm Caitlin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Mexican American. I've been like sort of I've been recommended this book a lot of times by a lot of different people, so I'm just overjoyed to be able to read it with all of you and discuss it with all of you. And I feel like a lot of like Latino people in my community are trying to like reconnect with their Chicano heritage or other indigenous ancestry. So I feel like this book is just really beautiful, and I'm so grateful it exists.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and I'm really glad you're here. And Nick, would you like to go?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick or Nix, she, they pronouns. I have a podcast called Red Shirt Collective, which is an anarcho-communist Star Trek Next Generation watch-along podcast. Quite a mouthful. And an exciting little tidbit about me is that this week I might possibly finally be getting diagnosed after being sick for 15 years and not getting any answers or any help. So I'm incredibly nervous and very excited and just hoping that that all goes well. And I'm also just so glad to be here because Braiding Sweetgrass is one of my all-time favorite books, and I'm just thrilled to be able to talk to people about it.
Yeah, so you've read it before.
I have, yeah, and I'm like really excited to read it again. And this time I got the audiobook from the library, and it's actually read by the author, so it's really fun to like reread it by having her read it to me. She's got a very soothing voice, and it's really nice as an autistic to hear like a nice soothing voice reading to you.
Yeah, Chris was telling me about that, and yeah, I'm. I think I'm gonna get the audiobook too from the library and just like take notes and like underline things while listening to it. Um. Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, let's start diving in. I took some notes, but I didn't finish writing them all down. But if people want to look at what I've got, people can feel free to. Um, so whenever I'll go over like a little bit like what book club usually looks like. So for book club, I normally write notes before uh, book club, and then the notes I have will kind of help guide the conversation. And I like there to be like a flow of conversation. One thing I ask is if people can to like try to be on camera because I know whenever I'm off camera, like I just kind of do other stuff, and it's nice when it feels like we're all here. But I also understand not everyone can do that. Um, but yeah, I want the conversation to kind of flow. And if anyone is like, "Ooh, I don't like this," or "I'm kind of bored with this," or "want to do it differently," let me know because I want this to really feel like it's our book club. It's not really my book club. It's just I'm just trying to help guide the conversation a little bit, but I wanted to feel like this is all of our thing. So let me know any feedback if there's ways I can improve it or improve it. So yeah, I'm streaming my notes if anyone wants to look at that. So, whenever I start a book, I talk a little bit about the author just to kind of, I just think it gives a lot of context, like whenever I do this. So, the author of this book is Robin Wall Kimmerer. Um, she's indigenous, um, and I just kind of copied and pasted some stuff in a bio page. So I'll just kind of go through that. So it says, Robin Wall Kimmerer is a mother, scientist, decorated professor, and enrolled member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation. She is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants and Gathering Moss, A Natural and Cultural History of Mosses, She lives in Syracuse, New York, where she is a SUNY or SUNY Distinguished Teaching Professor of Environmental Biology and the founder and director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment. Yeah, she's just done a lot of stuff. Like she's like seems to be has her hands in a lot of projects. She serves as the founding director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment, whose mission is to create programs which strengthen the system of both indigenous and scientific knowledge for our shared goals of sustainability. Her research interests include the roles of traditional ecological knowledge and ecological restoration in the ecology of mosses, which just sounds really interesting to me. She holds a bachelor's in botany and a master's and PhD in botany from University of Wisconsin, which I thought was really incredible. Says, as a writer and scientist, her interests in restoration include not only restoration of ecological communities, but restoration of our relationships to land, which I really get that vibe from reading this book, as really it seems like she wants to talk about our relationship to land. So yeah, that's a bit about her. Oh, I totally butchered this name earlier. Potawatomi. Hopefully I'm saying that. Potawatomi. She is Potawatomi. They're an Algonquian speaking tribe in North America. And I just like went into a little bit about the Potawatomi, which we kind of read about in Braiding Sweetgrass a little bit in this first section. So the Potawatomi slowly moved west as the French and British and Dutch colonies expanded. They originally were from the lower peninsula of Michigan, and then they moved back to lower Michigan. But yeah, they moved around a lot, as we kind of read about in the book. They lived in agricultural villages, and then I like showed a picture of like the kinds of like homes that they lived in, and so I'm trying to go through this because I think me just kind of like reading it word for word is like a bit dull. But yeah, they were displaced, and then they went to a Kansas reservation, and then they kind of like they took in like cultural practice of Plains Indians, and then and then they like I think they moved to Oklahoma, and then I think they went back to the lower peninsula of Michigan, which is so there's 26,000 individuals. And sorry, this part is I'm not presenting this in a very interesting way. I'm just like reading this list of stuff. But yeah, I think it's just kind of interesting to know like who they were. And then I tried to look up a little bit like what are they doing right now? Just kind of like currently as like a group of people. They're still trying to preserve their language, but I would definitely like to find out more of like how they're surviving as a nation. But yeah, that's a little bit about Potawatomi. And yeah, let's dive into the book. So the first thing we read is the preface. So the best, I thought it was really beautiful. Like it's like this, it talks about braiding sweetgrass. And it says the best way to do this is with someone else. Like you can tie it up and you need to have like a little bit of pull. You can do it on your own. But the best way is to really just do that with another person. And it says, linked by sweetgrass, there is a reciprocity between you. Linked by sweetgrass, the holder is vital as the braider. The braid becomes finer and thinner as you near the end until you're braiding individual blades of grass and then you tie it off. And I just thought that was like really beautiful. Like there's like all these things that like you know you kind of like take for granted, and she like always comes back to this communal aspect of that, this relational aspect. Yeah, any thoughts on the preface or anything else that people want to bring up with the preface that they kind of took note of?
I like that there was agency expressly given to Sweetgrass as well. Like nobody owns Sweetgrass. I thought that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I quite like having an origin story at the beginning of the book, like a cosmology of how the Earth came to be and its like it's a story, first of all, that I like the idea of a kind of story that involves a bunch of people co-creating something or a bunch of entities co-creating something. And it also like drives home the point of like the power of stories and narrative in how you frame your world or outlook, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was really fascinating. Um, I had heard that story before from a friend, and it was really interesting to read it and hear. Um, I thought it was really interesting. Like something that stood out to me is that she's a guest. So like she's a guest, and then all these animals help her. Like it describes her as like this helpless human, and they all have to help her. And like the muskrat, like sacrifices his life to get some mud, so that way she has some earth. But then it's like, I'll read this thing. So, but then it says, these she scattered, wait, in her grasp were branches. This is on page 4 on the bottom. In her grasp were branches, fruits, and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals, too, had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. And I thought that was so beautiful that, like, now that there's land, she's taking care of it and planting things. And now, like, everyone is just living this abundant life. I was like, so beautiful how, just like all these animals, like everyone's like working in collaboration, like literally like everyone's like helping everyone out, and so now like everyone gets to live this beautiful abundant life. And like what a beautiful origin story. That was great. um yeah, does anyone have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Jeremy, I didn't
Well,
see you earlier. I'm really glad you're here.
yeah, glad to be here. Sorry, Silver Sweet, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, reading this origin story, I've heard a few like different ones from other interviews, but I was like, there's a lot of similarities to like in the for Kanaka Maoli or Native Hawaiian cosmology. It's actually Sky Father, but the story is very similar. Um, I was like, well, yeah, this is it, the Aina, that's the Hawaiian word for land, that is your mother. It's very similar in a lot of our cultures, including Pachamama is another name for it in our indigenous relatives in South America or South Turtle Island, which they call Hanuna or Abiyala. I'm sorry. Anyways, I just like this. There's a lot of things happening in my mind right now, but definitely, yeah, the land being the parent, for Hawaiian it would be Makua, like the parent of people, right? And Sky Father is Wakea in our cosmology, and then Wakea waters Earth Mother. From that, the first child is kalo. Kalo is our staple food, um, most important food for us to survive in the Pacific. Uh, and second child that was stillborn was the second child was people. So people are the younger sibling for Native Hawaiians of the kalo. Without the kalo, there is no people, right? And we have to respect our elders, our older brother kalo, and our mother and our father, right? And so you have like the culture and uh the not the hierarchy, but the lack of hierarchy, really, and the familial relationships between the land and the people, or the Kanaka. That's the word that basically means people. Is very similarly entwined. And I love the example of the two gardens. um, I'm not sure if that's still in the preface, but it's kind of like how the cosmologies reflect the worldview. It's like a multi-millennia deep worldview of Eve being banished and forced to I'm like researching all this like hunter gatherer mythology from the ancient Roman, Greek, and Egyptian era, and it's just like it reflects thousands of years of history in my mind. It's totally different from a lot of the history in Turtle Island, the Pacific, and a lot of other indigenous cultures, Asia Pacific, Turtle Island, a lot of Africa actually, and all of our stories. Whenever I talk to my other relatives, it's like there's so much in common in just the basic relations between people, land, nature, and this understanding, and actually the story the stories are. I don't have all the receipts on all of it, but there's definitely a deep familial and like I'm almost certain that like there's been exchanges between there's other words like mahalo and masicho. There's all these words and narratives that repeat and repeat and repeat that have been kind of like eradicated by Western anthropology. And I could go on this forever, so I'm gonna stop.
Yeah, no.
Honestly, I like hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, you always provide a lot of information. That's really good. Yeah, does anyone else have anything to add?
I don't know if this was in the preface. Here, I'm gonna try to turn my camera on. Oh my god. I don't know if this was in the preface or what, but I noticed how she talked about how yeah, like backing on what he just said, like comparing it with the origin story of Christianity and like with Eve and like the Garden of Eden and stuff, and how Eve and Sky Mother are similar, but then they're like so they're completely different, their experiences. And I really like the part where she said Eve like is banished, like she's banished and she has to work for her food, like she has to work by the sweat of her brow to like earn her keep or whatever, because she like did this bad thing. And then it's like Sky Mother is like juxtaposed by like she, like you guess, which is really interesting that she's an immigrant, she's not from there, but she gathers everyone together and provides, but they also provide for her. Like she doesn't have to like earn anything, she just like they naturally have a relationship of like trust between her, the land, the animals, the plants, and all of them are relatives. I feel like that really just shows the difference between like patriarchal Western white colonizer Christian views on women specifically, and that directly relates to the land, how they view the land as well, which both of them are viewed as like resources and just objects that they don't have a relationship with. So I don't know, I just really like that she pointed that out, because I think that Silver Spook, what you're saying too, is like that's like a very similar thread running through a lot of indigenous histories of creation, is like, even though like you said Sky Father, like it's not because the like mother comes second, it's because they're all a family, and that still is just very starkly different from how Eve is viewed as like kind of subordinate and like punished.
Yeah, I think the creation story is like super comparing and contrasting. It's really interesting because I do think the story of Adam and Eve has like messed us up. Like she talks about how, you know, these creation stories definitely influence us, and we grew up, so many of us, whether we're religious or not, because Christianity is so dominating, grew up with this story of like Eve, the like, and I like how you point out that's like super sexist, like Eve, like the woman messed it up for everyone, and now she's punished, and everyone else has to be punished because of her. And yeah, she's just like it's a punishment. And I always thought that was like really interesting. I read this book called, oh, what's it called? There's a gorilla in it, and like this person's like talking to this gorilla, and you know what I'm? Isn't it what
Daniel Quinn?
Daniel
like,
Quinn?
Ishmael.
Ishmael.
Oh
Yes.
That's my other favorite book.
Yeah, that's a good book club book. Yeah. But like in that book, like, you know, Ishmael's talking about the story of Adam and Eve and like what it means. And I don't know if this is like literally like an anthropological take, but he talks about how like there's that the sort of Adam and Eve could perhaps be a transition from people being, you know, some sort of like hunter gatherer kind of situation and transitioning to farming, and how that maybe perhaps seems strange to some people, where they were living off land in a different way, and then when other people started farming, that maybe looked maybe weird to some people, and that's why maybe to them, whoever was writing that was a punishment, because it's like, well, why would you choose to like cultivate your food in that way? Because some people started doing that, and while other people didn't. But I thought that was a very interesting take, that it was like this like change of like how people got their food, and it was like, well, why would you like maybe perhaps like I don't know if this is like truly like what happened historically, but like perhaps this is like people being like, well, why would you gather your food in that way when we've been like living off the land in this way and it's been easier for us, and that just seems like more work. But yeah, I don't know, that would
I could probably comment on that a little bit.
yeah.
I've been specifically like looking into that because I remember I took in Western education system college, I took anthropology classes, and they talk about and this the hunter gatherer in this idyllic time, you know, in the Western understanding is like there's this great time where people work 2 hours and they gathered all of their calories and in their food and their nuts, and that was great. And then you know, it's kind of like the Garden of Eden is kind of being banished. You know, primitive savage world, but it's, you know, actually it was very advanced. And look at the Kung people in Africa, look at this Amazon tribe, but it's too bad we can't go back there. We're banished from the Garden of Plenty, and now we have to go out and you know, it's kind of like when you start farming, part of it is when you start doing agriculture, you go from moving and having a fluid existence, right? Because now that you're planting and it's very difficult, you have tractors, right? You have to spend many hours toiling, arthritis and these other ailments, and it's a life of more and more suffering, at least in the way that it happened in like the Mediterranean region, right? So the antiquity era, like Egypt, Rome, Sumeria, Mesopotamia, Greece, that whole section. And like it's just kind of like way that the way that it kind of happened there resulted in a certain like increased territoriality, because the way that when you're planting, if you don't take care of your crops, when you're taking care of your crops, if the crop fails, it's very risky and it's dangerous. Everybody starves. When you're fluidly moving and just gathering berries and nuts and hunting, etc. You don't have to plant. You don't have to expend all the energy. So you're spending like 2 hours or less in that state. But the thing is, like in places like Hawaii, as an example, we did ecological. It's called Ahupua'a system, where you'd have from the mountain to the sea. It is a form of tending to land, but we only require 2 to 3 hours. You gotta have like terrace system of basically hydroponic, aquaponic, mud flat areas, similar to Southeast Asian methods of tending the land of kalo, and then those would feed down. We have fish and other crustaceans like swimming around to assist the plants, and each person we have to like deeply understand the connections of the mountain regions to the midland regions, and then we had like fish ponds that would provide with only like 2 hours of work or less per day. So similar to idyllic conditions under the hunter-gathering mode, we were still able to farm, but work minimally because of the understandings of the science and the biology and the interconnected systems within nature, right? And so, and you know, I mean, I think it's just, I think about it, it's not like there's something wrong with people came from places that originated Christianity and mass organized violence that came out of guarding your territory, right? Protecting your territory, particularly under scarcity, under a desertifying Egypt, and then you have You know, because if you're tending to your crop and you're spending 8 hours a day, 10, 12 hours a day, and someone runs out of food over there and they come for your food, you have to defend it. And if you don't defend it, your family starves, and to defend it, you need weapons to, and then you know, increasing levels of integration. 1,000-person army is going to stop a 500-person army, and a 10,000-person, and then, you know, that's a long one. But in an indigenous Turtle Island, very similar. People could gather the rice, spill a little bit, right, and create like what looks to Europeans like a chaos or nothing. It doesn't look like the farming they do, right? But it's because they do inefficient or less, actually less scientific farming, really. And so that results, and also less interconnected farming. And it's just kind of I almost want to say it's just like an accident of history that they have now deeply unhealed ways, you know, and the United States is just the latest iteration of a Roman, British, Spanish, French, feudal capitalist colonial slavist system based on the accidental failure that caused. The story of Cain and Abel is really the kind of one of the origin stories of the first mass violence, fighting over food, because indigenous peoples, like in Hawaii, barely had any. Turtle Island, like we're talking about, like if there is a conflict, you know, we can move on to the next region, when you're hunter gathering, you can move on. You don't have to defend your territory. And when you have abundance, because everybody understands how to spend 2 hours a day and then gather all the calories needed, but he's fighting over food for because there's no starvation threat. So you have things like the bowl and spoon rule, and anyways, in Turtle Island, where you meet, you know, in these places for trading, and there's a basic rules like please don't bring any weapons, and nobody is worrying about starving to death. But that doesn't mean there's no conflict ever. There are times of scarcity, but systems to deal with conflict and conflict resolution, or, you know, non-carceral justice evolved, like Ho'oponopono in Hawaii, where if there is a time of scarcity, to stop mass organized violence breaking out, we would bring everybody together and make it right before it spirals out of control, like in Adam and Eve's case. But yeah, anyway.
Can I say
Early
something?
in the morning for me.
Sorry, that
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with what you just said. I feel like it just kind of connected some dots for me, because thinking about the Eve story and how Lua, you were like, oh, she's bad. Like everyone knows that's like the misogyny thing of like Eve, it's Eve's fault, it's always the woman's fault. But I started thinking about that because the devil or whatever, Satan, he coerces her. He lies to her and manipulates her and harms her, because he's like, no, this is really good, like you should do it, it's gonna be great, and you won't get in trouble. He like literally lies to her, coerces her, and then she's the one that gets punished. And to me, that just screams like victim blaming and like rape culture. And that is literally how patriarchy functions, to make sure that they never have to take accountability for anything. They get to pretty much do whatever they want, because it's like the woman's fault. And we all know that's illogical, right? But it kind of reminds me of like what you're saying, Silver Spook, about how in indigenous Hawaiians, they weren't faced with starvation. The people that you're specifically referencing, because of like the hunter-gatherer methods, and they also were non-carceral. They had these ways of solving conflict that were communal. And it reminds me of like what happens when any person of any gender is like, I was assaulted, like they get shunned out of the village or whatever. Like that to me is like patriarchal. And that is what you were kind of saying, like agricultural people who are doing agriculture, like maybe are faced with more scarcity with starvation, and that causes them to like defend their land and like see the land maybe in a different way. Like it is this resource that you need dominance over, or else you might die. Like, and the land relates to how they see women. To me, I always just remember like that on Turtle Island today, indigenous women face the highest rates of murder and domestic violence, like right now. And it's actually like a crisis right now. And that is happening. Most of that violence is happening near labor, near like oil wells, oil rigs. I don't know, like places where white men are like working the land, like extracting oil from the land. Like it's so like directly connected to how they view the land, how they view like the resources as just kind of like disposable or something that they want to dominate. Sorry, I'm rambling, but I just like I've never seen the Eve story in that way before of like they're justifying this violence against the land, against Eve by being like it's your fault. And Sky Woman is like not to blame for anything bad that happened to anybody. Like everyone's a community.
Adam and Eve. They are using these stories to understand their circumstances at the time. And when we're talking about this circumstance at the time, they're moving from a society that didn't have such a concept of ownership to a society that had a very strong concept of ownership. And the way a lot of people interpret the Adam and Eve creation myth is in part they're moving into what was I gonna go with this for? Give me a second. It's talking about some of the natural consequences of the actions that they're taking. In the violence that is being perpetuated in different parts of that story, which isn't even necessarily Eve's fault. Even my conservative church I grew up in considered the first sin to actually be on the part of Adam, being continuously perpetuated, and the sin therefore resulting in more sin as a result of itself. That is sort of my take on it. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm having trouble explaining that.
It's definitely a long and winding path of how we got from there to here, we collectively. But yeah, definitely a lot of power in examining those seemingly disconnected, not relevant anymore stories, when in fact they probably underwrite a fair bit of what we do, or at least how we got here. But maybe we should try talking about the first chapter of the book for a bit.
Oh, well, we kind of did
We
jump
could
to the
probably talk
first
about the preface
chapter.
all the time, and it would be really fun. But
This
Well,
part was actually in the first part of the book.
we just kind of transitioned
oh,
to
sorry.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, my bad.
Is that what
I
we're
meant
talking about?
I didn't mean to like try to end the discussion because I think it's really interesting, but I also just wanted to know how people felt about like specifically the Pecans and the weaving together of like a more contemporary history with the three braids, like the history, um, the indigenous way of knowing, and kind of the Western way of knowing, which seem to have a habit of going, oh my gosh, sorry, you guys were right, haha, my bad, didn't think of that.
No, it's a good point. I mean, we should probably start heading over to the next chapter. But before we do, there was like a couple things in here that I just wanted to talk about really fast. One thing that I thought was interesting was how she asked, I think, her students, and being like, how do you think like humans go together with nature? And they're like, not too well. And then she said, can you think of any examples where humans do go well with nature? And they like couldn't think of anything. And I was like really sad, because I feel like in this day and age with capitalism, it's like it is genuinely like hard to think of examples. And then like literally all of like the examples I can think of are just like indigenous people, like just like taking care of the world around them in whatever way that's specific to that particular group of people. And yeah, outside of that, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. So that's something that's I thought was really interesting. And then sorry, I'm like going through this really fast because I want to try to get to everything. I guess I mentioned that. Just like, yeah, she talks a lot about how like literally other, plants have a consciousness. Like she talks about, and she does talk about this in the chapter about pecans, so maybe I'll save that for just. Yeah, I'll save that for the pecan chapter. Um, she talks about how Sky Woman is an immigrant. But it says on page 9, it was through her actions of reciprocity, the give and take with the land, that the original immigrant became indigenous. For all of us, becoming indigenous to a place means living as if your children's future mattered. To take care of the land as if our lives, both material and spiritual, depended on it. And I was like, yeah, that's totally it. Because it's like, to me, this is, this may seem arbitrary, but like when I think about indigenous peoples, I guess for me, like something that's just so profound is like, because, there are people indigenous to places, like when I really think of indigenous people, I think of people like taking care of the land around them. And it's like this kind of like, I don't know, it's like this, like like when we read the Red Deal, it talks about like, we need to create a system of care instead of a capitalist system, which is just destruction. And so like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's very relational. Like belonging somewhere, I think, is very relational. Can you take care of this place? Can you co-caretake with other beings and creatures there as well? And I don't know. That might seem arbitrary to some people because it's not like this like objective thing. But to me, I'm like, I like the people who really care and are taking care of a place. I'm like, yeah, this is where you belong, and that's what makes you belong in a way. So I'm really glad that she said that.
Can I add something real quick here?
Please do. Yeah, I'm just like blowing through things. Yeah, please add on.
One thing that really like struck me in the course of this whole conversation, and why I feel like I very much want to talk about the pecans, but I get why all this is connected, is because when you had brought up that there's this book Ishmael, I don't know that book, but like the whole time that y'all were talking, I was thinking that like where I come from, it's a very literature focused background, and Moby Dick is considered like the big great American novel, and it's about this guy that like just goes and hunts this whale for a sense of adventure, right? And in thinking about like reading this book and seeing how the animals, the plants, the take care of each other, I feel like when Ben, you're talking about like this being a very like influential book for the way that we think about each other and the way that we talk about each other. This is like a really good, perfect example of that, because instead of it being like, there are people that are working with each other, and there are animals and plants, and everybody is working with each other. The American frame is kind of like, oh, well, the muskrat died for us, so we should continue doing that, right? And it's like, even the Adam and Eve thing, it's like, we have to be able to conquer the snake. The snake is trying to get back at us, right? The whale is something that we have to like take and conquer and everything like that. And so like something that really struck me is that like I had always known that it's called Turtle Island. I mean, not always, but like for a long time, right? But I had never read this story before. And hearing it now, I'm like, I can kind of see the formations of the American identity in here, is just like taking that concept and just taking it in the worst direction that you could. So yeah, that's all that I wanted to share.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also, yeah, this just kind of like slapped me in the face. It's like probably a bit like silly that I just realized this, but yeah, like this is like the origin story of Turtle Island, therefore like an origin story of the US. And yeah, that's really cool, because I think for me, like I think of like I don't know, I always think of like I always think of just like the mass genocide and slavery that the US was built on, and it's like really grim, and it's honestly like really nice to have this origin story to be able to attach some framework of understanding to, that's like really beautiful. And yeah, she mentions how she feels like very glad that she has had this story to latch onto, as opposed to like other origin stories that are not as great. There's just this one quote that on like the very last page where she wraps up, I just want to read because I really like it. But she says, plants know how to make food and medicine from light and water, and they give it away. And I don't know. I just thought that was so beautiful. Like, just, yeah. It's a very beautifully poetic book. Um, I know we kind of started to like go through like that last chapter a bit fast, but does anyone have anything they want to add before we talk about the pecans?
Can I say something? Sorry,
Yeah.
I just interrupted you. I feel like a Kenny. I don't know if this is the space. This is my first time like meeting a lot of you. I don't know if this is the space to say this or if I should say it in chat, but I feel a little activated right now because of what Ben was saying. Like, I feel like you were kind of dismissing, like, I was talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, and I feel like that's like first and foremost, like, you can literally apply like everything back to that. And I felt like you were kind of like, can we get back to the book? And I'm like, that is the book. I feel a little bit like I'm like a white, like, Indigenous woman, so I have like white privilege, but like my like Indigenous sisters, like, I felt like a little bit like you were silencing me for a second. I don't know. I don't like really feel like I'm not trying to make it all about me, but I just really felt like that was like I want to just address that. If we're going to be discussing like a book about Indigenous women written by an Indigenous woman, femme person, I feel like that's just like the lens to look at it with. Like, I do feel like it relates. And also what Silver Spook is saying, like, heavily related too. I don't know, I just
Okay,
wanted to
is it okay?
express
Can I respond?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I was maybe a bit out of line. I was acting out of like a kind of a nervousness of like, oh, we had planned to do this, and I was like deferring to that like plan, which not even my plan, and I could have just let the discussion continue organically. I definitely did not want to speak over any issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Absolutely not. Uh, and if I did, I really apologize. I was reacting, and I do say reacting, like rather than responding. I was reacting more to the very deep and super interesting conversations about power and source. The the power that origin myths and and creation stories and cosmologies have in discussions. And I thought, oh my god, this is so interesting. I could talk about this. I could listen to people talk about this for a long time. Oh no, what about the plan? So yeah, long-winded apology. Thank you for calling me out, and yeah, maybe I'll sit the rest of this one out for now, unless you have. I mean, I've talked a lot already, so.
I also talked a lot. I just appreciate you saying that now. Thank you.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about sitting out or anything. Like, I definitely want us all to chime in. And I feel like sometimes like stuff's gonna happen where like people will like feel cut off, and we just gotta address. I'm glad that we're addressing it, but definitely keep on talking and chiming in.
I'll think hard before attempting to redirect the discussion like that again.
Okay, sure.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, anything else before we go on to the pecan chapter?
Yeah, I was gonna mention the version of this book that I have has like an introduction in it that's like 10 pages. That was published in 2020, so it has like references to like the ongoing pandemic and stuff. So maybe like if we have time at the end, I can share a little bit of that. But I also had there were several places in like the preface and the first chapter where I wrote in like the margins ancestral memory, like whenever they said like remembrance and like remembering to remember like the traditions and stuff that people do, um, just remembering to remember, and then also how like plants hold the ancestral memory, since like if you're on the land that your ancestors were on, they took care of those plants, so like that those plants have their care in them, and that kind of goes like back into the land and stuff. So that was like, and then it also reminded me of something that Silver Spook told me about like maybe a month ago, sporadic temporality. And I saw it in a I saw it in like a paper the other day that gave it a definition. sporadic temporality refers to to an indigenous experience of time that is informed by a people's particular relationship to the seasonal cycles on their lands, and which acknowledges the present generation's responsibility to the ancestors and those not yet born. This complex of relations to the land lived in an embodied manner on that land or in diaspora. Together make up the indigenous concept of place, as this explained by Glenn Coulthard, Yellowknives Dean. And that's from Sporadic Temporality and Cultural Continuity for Indigenous Sovereignty by Laura Maria DeVos. That was another thing I wanted to mention. And then with the bringing up Pachamama. Oh wait, can you not hear me?
Oh no, we can hear you.
It's a Silver Spook. Okay. And then bringing up Pachamama that Silver Spook brought up briefly. I got a little Quechua phrase book recently, and I've been going through the first couple pages and found out that in Quechua there is no word for to have. The closest thing is to be with, and you say that for how old you are too. I am with 26 years type of thing. And then this is tangential, so I can share this at the end. But I wanted to share a Okinawan origin story of humans. I can share that at the end if we have time. But yeah, that's it for the first 2 chapters.
Okay, great. And actually, oh, sorry. Go
ahead. Do you mind repeating? Was it sporadic temporality?
Yeah, sporadic temporality, like a spiral.
How is that? Oh, sporadic. Okay, cool.
Yeah, the idea being that time, and I heard it said casually before, from a friend who's from the same village as I am, also mentioned time's like a spiral, and I'm like, what? But the idea being things happen over and over, but slightly different. And the little bit that I read from a separate paper was talking about circles, the drum circles and power circles and things like that, where people dance in circles, and that being kind of an example of that, where you're doing it and your ancestors are joining you in it because they did it before. So it's time happening over and over, but in the same place. If that makes sense. Yeah.
That reminds me of the concept of Sankofa. A little bit.
Kofa? What is that?
It means go back and get it. Indigenous African word, I think. I don't actually know what kind of language it is from, but the concept of yeah, you're connected to the past and you can go back and get it and bring it here.
Yeah. Yeah, so before talking about the Pecan chapter, Caitlin, was there anything else you wanted to add about murdered and missing Indigenous women?
Thank you for saying that. May 5th actually is the Awareness Day. That's actually coming up, right? Yeah, that's in 4 days. May 5th is usually the Day of Awareness. So on that day, you can look up the hashtag MMIW this week, and the color is red. So if you ever see a red handprint over an Indigenous woman's mouth, that's what they're doing. They're representing them being sort of solidary with women who've been silenced and been taken. Women, so it's MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, and Two Spirit. So it's Indigenous Women 2S. So it's more than cis women that are facing this violence. So that actually I think it's MMIW, gender non-conforming. So GN2S and two-spirited people are at risk for domestic violence. So yeah, just look up the hashtag.
Awesome, thanks.
Also on May 4th, 5th, and 6th, there's a meteor shower happening, I think. So that's interesting that coincides.
That is interesting, wow.
All right, so for the chapter on pecans, I guess we'll just do it a little bit more loose flow, talking about it, since we have about 10 minutes or so left. But yeah, that's where she talks about how the trees fruiting, she talks about how like that happens all at once, and it's not just like an orchard doing it. It'll be like across the nation, like they'll all do it at the same time, and people don't really know why, but they're communicating. And she talks about how people don't think that plants have a consciousness, and they do, and we need to learn how to like talk and take care of all these other beings that have a consciousness, but just it's different than ours, but it's still there, and be able to have a relationship with these other beings. It's not exactly how she puts it. She puts it much better than that, but yeah, anyone want to kind of just dive into this chapter and talk about things that stood out?
I like how it opens with a personal story, like in her family,
Yeah.
and she's immediately able to weave, not immediately, but she's able to really effectively weave a personal story about her family into not only a broader history of indigenous people, in that part of the world, but also, yeah, the biology and, like
But
weaving the
Grandpa,
history. Yeah, weaving the history together and the biology together with the personal story. I think it's a great example of I guess, the intentions and method of this book.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love that part, Ben, too. And I love when she's like, yeah, it's funny because my grandpa, like he's a war soldier. He's like has all these accomplishments, but he's like when his grandkids remember him, they think of him as that little boy like running around naked carrying pecans in his like pants. Thought that was really cute.
I think the
I
biggest thing from this chapter. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead.
The biggest thing, like the things that I underlined the most in this chapter was like the repeating of all flourishing is mutual. And I think that's like super important. But then also something that I thought was interesting was like how pecan is like the word, like a general word for nuts. But like we in English we've adopted it as like a word for a specific nut.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because like there's like also this debate of like, do you say pecan or pecan? And it's actually or I could be saying this wrong, but like pigan or pegan or but Pigan. And so it's like everyone's wrong. It's literally this indigenous word, and yeah, I just thought it was like fascinating. Yeah, and that's like a word that we get from the, I think, Potawatomi people. I keep on saying that name wrong, but it's a name that we get from them, and we don't even know. Yeah, and I think also just I do want to just kind of like say a little. I don't know if I have much to say, but just when she was talking about the way that they had to just like be relocated over and over and over again, and then they ran into the pecans, and they didn't really know what they were at first, but then they also started taking care of these trees. They just, wherever they go to, they're gonna be like taking care of the land and kind of like making it their new home in a way. And I thought that was really sad that they were forced into that, but also like really lovely that they were taking care of the trees.
I think I could probably dovetail off of that, which is as a native, as a native Hawaiian, not living currently in my home Ahupua'a. So I've been forced out by the United States Empire. I'm on the. Yeah, I love this island as well. The big island Omoku Okeawe. It's a beautiful island. I can't. It's a $1.2 million for a small one bedroom next to the highway in the ghetto where I'm actually from. I couldn't afford to live there. It's 2 million, 3 million for a nice house. If there's any drinking water left after the U.S. military keeps dumping jet fuel in my water, in the vai, the fresh water that gives life. So I've been on the trail of death, in a certain sense. depress everybody right now, but it is like that's a real story. That's not over either, you know. Mark Zuckerberg is currently forcing thousands of my people off of his 1,200-acre ranch, Hawaii, as we speak. He's bought an entire freshwater reservoir, and so no. And the point is that like you know the history. I don't want to rehash the Amiv and the Papa Wakea narrative, but it's the same thing happening in this moment, right? Where you have somebody who is dominating. There's people, I call them the unhealed descendants of Achille and trauma, that are dominating people as we speak. Here we have Akemi. I have done a lot of streams with Akemi, and I'm glad I brought him into the group. But I have Okinawan sweet potato, the indigenous Uchinanchu Shimanchu people that are also being destroyed by the United States and Japan, dual colonizers, in our front yard, our garden, in our sweetgrass attempt to braid Western science that I always say I'm half stormtrooper because I was forced to speak English. Children are still being punished for speaking Hawaiian right now. I was just watching another video of another child being put outside of a classroom in the state of Hawaii speaking Hawaiian, February 2022. The United States illegal state of Hawaii, under the United Nations violation of the Human Rights High Commissioner's order for the United States to remove its military, illegal military occupation and fraudulent annexation from our land, and that eradication of culture and eradication of language is part of what is seen as an ongoing conflict between it is a patriarchal token mass violence based way, and a not perfect but just a more healed mass win-win cooperation based, what the Chinese call Shao Kang Shahui. It's another one of our relatives that nobody cares to listen to. And that's another one of my ancestors, like the Uchinanchu and Shimanchu people, are from other place that not perfect either, but they have built better ways of coexisting. And here, we try to, despite them forcing me, my land, along with my children, my family, we've been homeless many times on my land, forcing us to take out kalo, and we're braiding Uchinanchu and Native Hawaiian medicine and food relatives in the front yard right now. There are vast quantities of Americans, various colors, broken people from Africa, South Central America, have been forced and have now become, my own family, half of them are in the military, killing Iraqis for money, forced to redominate the rest of Asia and the Pacific and AFRICOM to survive. My own family has been destroyed. They're participating in this mass violence, not creating their own indigenous and our human international communities scientific understandings together. Anyway, that particular part, it strikes home particularly now, as my entire home island will become uninhabitable in less than a year at the current rate of 35 jet fuel being dumped into my aquifer. I'm worried about where I'm gonna put my grandma, my mom, and my dad, my sister, my brother, who are gonna be forced off that island very soon. I don't have enough space. Silver Spukui. This is Hawaiian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Maori word. It means working together cooperatively without bosses and without landlords. Produced, for example, revolutions in China like the Xing Chun Hui, which was started on an indigenous territory in collaboration with diaspora Chinese forced out by opium wars. The unhealed descendants of Achille and trauma, including the British and the Americans with their gunboats. So anyways, so importantly, for anyone, doesn't matter where you are from, how deep your ancestors' trauma. I have a horrible racist white cowboy great grandparent who slept with a gun under his pillow and beat his Hawaiian wife. It's terrible. A Japanese samurai, fascist Japan fought for the emperor. He probably killed, he killed many Chinese and or indigenous peoples in Asia. Possibly, and those are in my blood. They're not in my blood. They're in my ancestry. They're in my history. But they don't define who I am. Don't get to. Have to be acknowledged. And everyone, whatever. I know it's, it's hard. I know it's going to be difficult in a place like a 98% American identifying place like the United States. Bolivia is 50%. Vietnam is 99% identifying indigenous Vietnamese. If I can move my own homeland and try to coexist where I am, I'm gonna try to end this on a positive note. I don't want to, but there is a possibility of everybody learning how to peacefully coexist, to go back to the garden, but to exist in a way that is in mutual respect with each other, with the land, that is non-dominational, that is non-mass violence based, non-mass disinformation based, and is about win-win cooperation. It's about aloha. That's what aloha actually means. It's a deep, wide, infinite ocean of love that extends to everyone and everything, that envelops everyone back in, as opposed to banishing everyone out and then dominating all the disparate, divided and conquered peoples, right? Based on so that was a random Silver Spook, not rant. It's a high frequency jet engine decibel education session. But I'll stop there. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else that they want to add before we wrap up?
I do, but I feel like what I'm gonna talk about is gonna take a while.
Okay, we can do
Just
this.
like from responses.
So I guess for anyone who needs to get going, like feel free to go, and then we'll like wrap up with your thing, Jeremy, because I know sometimes it can be hard for people to leave in the middle of someone saying something. But we can wrap up on your thing, and it can just take a little bit longer.
Yeah, what I was wondering was the Akemi, when you had brought up the mass breeding before, that's the first time that I had heard about that. And I really wanted to hear from you and Silver Spook and Caitlin and anybody else who has been a part of or studied indigenous practices, and just the idea of there's a part in the book where it's like we should have learned the lessons from the pecan trees and the way that they did in relation to how political tactics they were using to fight against the U.S. empire. Like they didn't learn the lessons that they were supposed to from the trees, from the land, from their siblings, and I had never put things in that sort of frame before. So if this is like something that you're used to a way that you're used to thinking about things, I would love to know how thinking of the everything as your siblings influences your political outlooks and tactics and stuff. All right, this is a really big question.
I can talk on that a little bit. I remember Shao, who's been on some other panels with Silver Spook and I remember her posting something about how decolonization and indigenizing means not just about your people, but everyone else too. If you're not also caring about everyone else, you're not decolonizing. Is what I remember her writing. My mind kind of went a little bit. I have some more. Oh, okay, I remember. This was stuff that I heard on a podcast called All My Relations, and it was an episode about polyamory, but it the person that was speaking on it was talking about how in a way we are all polyamorous because we are all in relation to everything, whether we realize it or not. We are in relation to the place that we are in right now, where we came from, where we're going, the people in our lives, the foods we eat, the things we consume, both books and things like that. Because us reading this book exists on its own, but it's processing through us and us processing with each other, and we're getting more out of it by just talking about it. And in that way, it's we're all in relation to this book right now, and probably will continue to be. In terms of, I lost my train of thought a little bit, so I'll let someone else go.
I was really like my mind was blown when I heard about the way the trees speak to one another through pheromones. I feel like I've been like taught like I've learned about pheromones throughout the years, but it's always seemed like it was contentious in terms of like the scientific community's acceptance of it, you know. And now like hearing about it and hearing about how like the orchard's fruit together like in communion, it makes me feel so like that knowledge. I should have learned that as a child, you know what I mean? Like I should have had that worldview like from the get-go, and it makes me feel so sad. And it shows how like, you know, lonely and lost the people who created this sort of framework of understanding nature as this like foreign thing that must be dominated, you know, like it's just like it's tragic. I mean, because it's like I hear about these trees talking to each other. Like I've done a bit more studies on sort of the fungus side of things, so I'm a little more familiar with mycelial relationships with like root networks of trees and how they pass nitrogen to one another for their mutual survival and benefit for their environment. So like I'm like thinking about that, and then I hear, holy shit, the trees are talking too. What the fuck? Does everybody talk now? You know, it's just like, what if I had learned that as a little baby when I felt that naturally before, the world was beat into me, so anyways, I just felt like I wanted to highlight the pheromone element and how like shit, it was real the whole time. Like, I forgot who said it in the chat, but someone was like, isn't it a thing where modern science is like, oh wait guys, we were wrong, you were right this whole time. And I feel like that's another case of that. So yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, I recently read The Hidden Life of Trees. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And the entire book is about that, like how trees communicate, how they form community, how they do mutual aid, how they literally like speak, like they somehow make noises and have pheromones. Um, so highly recommend. It's all fascinating. And I agree, just tying it to this book, just how different your worldview would be if that's how you were raised, was to see and acknowledge that like plants have a certain kind of sentience, animals have a certain kind of sentience, like we're all connected, and to not see things as inert or inanimate when they definitely are not.
And going
Yeah.
a step further is like not only do they all have like they're living beings, they like are our relatives. Like we're like related to the plants. Like we are all living beings, so we're all like the same in a way related.
Yeah, and like if you live on the lands that your ancestors lived on, like once, like even if you're like playing around or something, like or just like putting your hands in the dirt, like little bits of you kind of like go into the dirt, you know? So then like that kind of, and then that grows into the plant, and you are nourishing the plant in that way. Um, on the topic of land, there's oh, I keep losing my train of thought. Um, it's a little like tangential about like Okinawa and what's going on there right now. Um, but there's also like I guess related to the chapter about like displacement and stuff. People in Okinawa, like after Japan annexed Ryukyu, it became very very poor, and like even before then, when they like softly annexed it, people became really really poor, so they had to go to other places like South America, which has like a huge Simanchu population. Um, and this also ties in. It gets a little money because like Okinawans get grouped together with Japan just based on like how history worked out and stuff. But in Peru, so where I was born, there's big Japanese and Okinawan and like Chinese uh, communities. And like two of the most famous dishes that Peru has, ceviche and chaufa, are Japanese slash probably maybe Okinawan also, and Chinese influence. And it's like immigrants that came over and like use used the, like the knowledge that they had and used the food and stuff that was on that land and like used the foods from that land and the techniques that they learned from, you know, like their ancestors and the land that they came from, and like combine them together, and now we have like delicious Peruvian food.
That's so incredible. Kalua, I know that you pointed out one of the parts in the book where it's like talking about what does it mean to be indigenous. It means to have a relationship with the land. It doesn't necessarily mean like you were like literally born there. Like you could be born there and maybe not be indigenous to the land. Like I love that.
I mean, I definitely like how she phrased that. I definitely don't want to like be like, oh, I'm indigenous now or something like that. But I like that, like in this, you know, creation story, like she or like the woman is an immigrant, and she like becomes like a part of this place by taking care of it. Yeah, I really love that.
I really love the focus on longevity as well, and generational kind of thinking. And that was another thing I got from the hidden life of trees, was just this perspective of these beings that live for so much longer than we can even really conceive of. And if we thought more in that kind of way, how it would change the way that we interface with the world, you know? Because so much is about like so much of like settler culture is about like taking care of yourself today, right now. And you don't really think about, I think the only people who think about future generations are like wealthy people trying to determine how they can make sure that their wealth stays in their family line and not be redistributed to anyone else. But capitalism kind of pushes us to all have to think very day to day. And I just like, you know, she gets into it more throughout the book, but just this idea, like how Sky Woman was pregnant. And so part of her perspective was like not just, oh, how do I live here now, but like how do I create a place that my child can grow in, and their children. And I just think that it's really beautiful and very different from how a lot of us approach life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I really like. I feel like when I keep on reading stuff like this, it's like focused on care as opposed to like, you know, when we read the Red Deal, it was like capitalism literally just destroys everything, and just like focusing like we need to like actually like build structure we're carrying, and you know, books like Braiding Sweetgrass, the Red Deal, it's always coming back to that. Yeah, any last thoughts before we start to wrap up?
Did Tobio want to say something? Oh, sorry. I thought Tobio had a thing to say, but did she leave? I don't
Oh
know why
no,
I
I'm
couldn't
here.
see it. Oh,
I'm here. I had earlier thoughts around the kind of Sumerian and Semitic, generally creation myths, but that's like a huge, it's like such a wormhole. It sounds like multiple people like I think that's like a cool conversation to have at another time maybe.
You want to try to give us a teaser, maybe?
Yeah, I would love to hear, because I was also kind of wanting to share the one of the creation myths that I know of Okinawa. I also want to hear. We want to share creation myths.
Sure, yeah. So I spent a lot of time reading like and studying like the Enuma Elish, a little bit less the Epic of Gilgamesh, which are like contemporaneous texts to, well, assumed to be contemporaneous texts to the kind of ancient Hebraic creation stories. Um, and I had a professor who was Orthodox who did comparative studies of kind of of those texts, right? The Hebraic um, and the Sumerian creation myths. And one of the things that he pointed out is you can read Genesis through the lens of or the you know the garden story through the lens of original sin, but the story still makes sense actually if you omit the concept of original sin from the story and read it as um, the snake being a sort of trickster avatar to Yahweh, and that like Yahweh kind of sets them up in a way. He's like, oh, don't mess with that tree, but humans are innately curious, and so of course they mess with the tree, and the great punishment is sort of like the like a great disillusionment, and there's in the aftermath of that there's pain and suffering, but uh, the idea that was conveyed is like, well, pain and suffering is a basic aspect of existence. Like humans are going to have suffering, but you have all these beautiful things that come to fruition from it. And because at the end of that story, you know, Yahweh teaches them how to make bread and all these other things. So there's like a transitional element there, for sure, going from like a more hunter gatherer, or I think at the time, like if you look at say the city that we think of as Babylon, where you have the Enuma Elish and you have these mass really hierarchical, you know, kind of brutal I'll say brutal civilizations. You have in the outskirts of that a lot of the people who became, you know, the Hebraic people who cultivated these, you know, this sort of like these parallel stories, and they transitioned toward agriculture, toward bread making, but they were still much more rural and less hierarchical. So I just think those stories they're really interesting. They're really telling, and you know we can take that same. I think we can take that same story and put a different lens on it. Whereas the Christian lens is very, you know, like, oh, you know, women are inherent, you know, are the inception of evil, and these things that just seem ludicrous to continually perpetuate onto people, and also seem very exploitative, right? Like, but I think there's another lens on that story that feels more rooted in a human and relational experience, as well, potentially.
Yeah, I can share. There's like I don't know if there's I don't know the creation like of the land. Like I don't know the story for that. I vaguely remember hearing that it was like a rope that was tossed into the sea, and like this Okinawa kind of looks like bits of rope floating on top of on top of the water. But there's this other story that I heard of, talking about interconnectedness and stuff. There's since there's like a vast diaspora of Uchinanchu, Shinanchu, Okinawans, Ryukyuans, Lushuans. I'm subscribed to a channel on YouTube called Hi 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 Sai that's in Peruvian Spanish, and they just like talk about little things, and like because there's like a very established, and they have like a whole building and stuff, and also in Argentina I think there's has been around for like 70 years and it's very established. But they had an episode where they were or a live stream or something where they were celebrating Kajimaya, which directly translated means like windmill, but it comes from the so there's like there's very various auspicious ages, and 97 is one of them. And when people turn 97, they're like dressed as children and like as newborns, and they have like little windmill things to hold, and like they're like put in a car and like paraded around the village so that everyone can like congratulate them and like touch their hands, and maybe they can like have some longevity passed on to them or something. Um, but the idea is that the story behind that is that there was the sky god that came down on like a tree, and he was like, oh, this is some nice ground, some nice clay, I can make these humans that I've been thinking of all this time. So the sky god made like three uh, male and female out of clay, 6 humans, and then it was like, oh boy, oh goody, and then left, and then the next day found them like all destroyed and was like, what happened? So then like did that again a couple days, and then at one point the sky god and the earth god, like the sky god came into contact with the earth god, and the earth god's like, what are you doing? This is my like what are you doing with my stuff, my earth? And then this guy was like, I'm sorry, I didn't ask permission. That's totally on me and stuff. But then they like came to an agreement, like, okay, you can have your humans for like 100 years, and then they'll be gone. And I'm like, okay. And then 97 years passed, and then the Earth God came and be like, okay, time to get rid of these humans. And the Sky God's like, but it's only been 97 years, and it's like, well, there were 3 leap years now. Oh darn! But then the Sky God was like, well, there's like elders, but there's also like adults and like newborns, and like you can't get rid of them all. They haven't lived to 100 or 97 yet. And the Earth God was like, okay, you're right. And like the way they agreed that those who lived to 97 years could get some more time. So the solution was to let humans live longer than 97. They should celebrate their 97th birthday year as if they were newborn babies. Then there would be no problem with the contract. And both the Sky God and the Earth God felt this would be a good way to let the Almighty God accept this new human life. So then that's how that year 97 came to be, in like that celebratory thing. That's the origin of humans according to Okinawans.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we're going a little bit over, so I think maybe wrapping up here is good. The book club's usually like an hour and 10 minutes, and then I think the first book club we have is always longer, and the last book club we have is always longer. And so I think I should just realistically be like, this is the first book club, it's going to be an hour and a half, and instead of, I just need to be realistic. Yeah, I guess I just do want to ask, does anyone have anything else that they want to, I guess, add before we just stop for the day?
Yeah, thanks for calling me out, Caitlin. Genuinely. Sorry. Just genuinely wanted to say thanks for calling me out, because I hadn't put as much heart into that interjection as I would like.
Thanks for listening, and I'm sorry if I took up a lot of. I kind of feel like I took a lot of space talking about my feelings.
No.
But I appreciate you, Ben.
It was important.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we can talk about this. Because I think there's moments for me where I've been like, hey, like, what do you mean by that, or something like that, and it's like, I think dealing with that in the moment's really good, and I'm really glad that you guys talked about it. And also, I think next time we have book club, because the first book club we have like introductions, and we also have like, I like read a little bit about the author. We're just like cramming in so much into the first book club, and I think next time it won't be crammed, because I know sometimes, Ben, you get worried about like us skipping stuff because sometimes we like rush through things. And so I think hopefully next time with time management, it won't feel so rushed. I hate that feeling of like, we got to get to everything and there's not enough time, and hopefully it won't feel like that so much either. Yeah.
Yeah, I normally try and encourage me slow things down and take more time, so I don't know where I was coming from with this. But guys, the pecans. It's a funny anachronism.
It's so great, yeah.
Jeremy, did you?
I was just saying this was great. I loved this book, and I loved y'all's discussion, and I'm glad that we were here today.
Yeah, me too. Did everyone feel like they gotta like say what they want to say, or did like anyone feel like did everyone like feel like the pace of talking was good? And because I'm also thinking like maybe we can have our microphones off too, because sometimes when you like turn it on or off, like when it's just like on and everyone can just kind of jump in. But did everyone feel like that flow was generally okay, or did people also feel like, oh, like I want to say something, but I'm like, sometimes it's awkward to jump in? How do people feel about the flow of the conversation?
Yeah, I feel a little bit of like that, like I don't want to interrupt people, but like then I also have like things to say, and then I don't want to be like thinking about what I'm gonna say while I'm trying to listen to someone else. So I'll try to like take notes, which is what I usually do. But then I'm like, well, this is gonna be kind of long, so I don't know if I want to bring this up right now. And then like then an hour and a half passes, I'm like, oh darn, I never got to bring that up. There's a little bit of that, but I don't know how to. I kind of just sometimes when there's like a brief opening, and I'm like, okay, go, and then I try to. But that's like me kind of like forcing myself out of habit of like being in
Maybe
school
integrating
and
the use of chat would help a bit with that.
Integrating
so
what?
if someone has something, integrating the use of chat, so someone could put something in the chat.
Yeah, we could
And if
do
there's not,
bumps or whatever it's called when people are like bump or something. You know what I'm talking about? When you have like a meet or no stack.
I think it's stack.
Stack.
Yeah,
That's what it
stack.
is.
Um,
Yeah.
I
Or
do
you
No.
can
not
do a
know.
little raised hand.
Yeah. So instead of raising your hand, you put in the chat and you say stack, and then whoever's like guiding the conversation is like, okay, Kemi's up next. We could try that. I think it'd be good. I think there's a lot of people, so that stack probably makes sense, and we can try that next time that way. Because I really want everyone to feel like we're gonna get to everything, and I hate that feeling of And again, we were jammed packed with a lot of like different stuff, and I think next time it'll hopefully go a bit smoother where we can talk about things naturally and not feel so much in a hurry. But yeah.
And I can also like, I know that I tend to like, I just did like jump in right away, but I just like can also do more to like be considerate of maybe not everyone is like as ready to say it as I am, so I can like just like give you more space and more time, Akemi, to
No,
like
don't do
formulate your
that.
thoughts.
Don't do it. No,
Don't
because
do it.
I feel like everyone's just like, oh, and then they go off mute, and then they're like, oh, and they're like, oh, you go ahead, and it's like, oh, and it's just like, no, let's just go. Let's just like, yeah, But also that's the thing with like stack, where people are like stack, and then they just know that they're gonna come up in a few minutes, and then they get it all out. But yeah, maybe we can try not having microphones on too, because I just like it when we're just like blah 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 blah, and it's like we're all just talking. I really like that vibe, but we have more people, so yeah. Oh, also I'm gonna end the stream here. I don't know if anyone's watching. Oh my gosh, people are watching? Wow. Hi everyone. Okay, we're gonna end the stream there. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week. Okay.